Hello, and welcome to Managing Student Learning, part of the 8th Floor's Mastering Technology Skills for Teaching and Learning series. My name is Leanne Morris, and I'm going to walk you through this next part of our project. You have hopefully been thinking about what it means to be a 21st century teacher as well as a 21st century student, and have thought a lot about what you want your classroom to look like. We love that positive energy, and we hope that everybody is dreaming big. On the other side of that, we have what we call the landmines, and we just don't feel like it would be fair or wise to go too much further without considering what are some things that may go wrong, what are some things that I need to consider to ensure success with my project, how do I manage my classroom, how do I manage my project, things along those lines. So that's what we're going to focus on in these next two short videos. Be sure and click to advance the PowerPoint. As my oldest brother Russell always says, it's best to make the plan and then work the plan. Once you have a plan, you know what you're going to do. You know where you're going to end up. And that's kind of important in a project the size of probably what you're doing for this class. Know where you want to be at the end before you begin. Doing that is going to save you a great deal of time. Knowing what you want the student learning outcomes to be, how you're going to assess, where you want students to be at the end of the project, that sort of thing, will help you know how to get there a little bit better. So in your planning, be thinking about where are the minefields, and hopefully there won't be too many, but you know there always are. So, have you thought about any of these things? These are going to apply to some folks, and it all kind of depends on what your project is as to what will be important. But in planning projects that involve technology, especially if they almost revolve around technology, some things you might want to think about. If you're in K-12, most especially, are you meeting the standards? How well is this going to meet the expectations of your institution and what you need to do? Are you meeting the standards of your division if you're at a college? Next, identifying goals, objectives, student outcomes. A lot of times people get caught up in the project and in just using the technology and forget why this might be a good idea or what the benefit is for the students. If you look at what you want the outcome to be for the student, it can help you be very economical in creating your project. You may find that there's a lot of steps you don't need to go through to get where you need to be. Just a thought. Controlling the flow. Managing a classroom with technology in it, if you've ever done that, is a little bit different than your normal classroom. It's like I always say, never work with, or I think W.C. Fields said it first, never work with children or animals. I add technology to that. And if you're working with all three, bless you. But thinking about how you're going to control the flow of your class and control the project. You want to prepare your students for this new kind of learning. They haven't learned how to learn. If you're doing something very different, if you're flipping your classroom or adding blended learning components or something that's really changing the dynamic of the classroom or your relationship with students and how you'll be interacting with them. If that's going to change a great deal, be prepared for them to not know what to do, for them to not know how to learn in that. Think about what your students are ready to do. Doesn't mean they can't do it. You just got to help them get there, and you're doing them a favor. Rules of engagement. One of the things that is important to remember is that the kids got to technology long before adults did, years ago, and they kind of made the rules. When they think of writing or talking about themselves in an online environment, typically they're thinking Facebook or text messaging or something along those lines. This is different. there's a different kind of etiquette or netiquette that's involved in working with technology. They need to know what those rules are. It's not that they aren't capable of meeting your expectations. They just need to know what those are. So how are you going to communicate that to your students? Sometimes it's a good idea to, depending on the age, to let them help you come up with the rules. Finally on this slide, assessment. Oftentimes working with technology, the learning comes in the process, not necessarily the product. So when you think about how are you going to assess it, think about how you might be able to assess the process. And giving students a rubric is very handy for them. It helps make the expectations much more clear to them, and they can see that this is in fact a process and not just a race to get to the end. Okay, see what's next. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about some of the obstacles that you may run into. And I do want to point out they may be obstacles right now, but that doesn't mean that there aren't solutions, especially if you're aware of them to begin with. You can either plan around them or find a way to get answers to whatever your needs might be, such as technology needs. Maybe what you're dreaming of doing right now isn't possible. Maybe you don't have the technology for it. Maybe you can find a way to get around that. Can you write a grant for what you need? Can you come up to the 8th floor and do your videos or things along those lines? Can you find a way to get to the technology you need? And on the other side of that, can you find a way to get the technology for your students? If you have all of those things, are those resources available to your students all the times that they'll need them? If you're only able to get in a computer lab once a week, that's something you really need to take into consideration. If you're asking students to do things outside of class time and there's a portion of your student body that doesn't have access to technology, that could be an issue. Something else to think about is you may have all these great ideas, and they are great ideas, and in theory your your administration, your institution may be supporting you, but you probably want to run it by somebody if you're doing something that there's no precedent set on. Just to make sure that you haven't put all that work in, get your kids involved, and they say, oh, no, you can't do that. It happens sometimes. Usually, but you guys know, your administration, your schools are usually as supportive as they can be. But just make sure, something to think about. The other thing is parental buy-in. If you're going to have your students, especially if they're under 18, if you have your students working on anything to do with the internet, online, and any kind of networking, social networking, that kind of thing, you're going to need to make sure the parents are aware of that. And recently in a class we were discussing how you might go about getting that permission. If you're planning on doing some sort of technology project with your students, you may want to send a letter home to the parents saying that as a member of my class, your student will be working on the internet. And there you have it. If they have a problem, then they need to contact you. Apparently there's a lot of trouble with getting parents to return permission slips. And they felt that a solution was don't ask for permission, tell them. That's just an idea. Okay, so we're going to move on in the next video and talk a little bit about what are some of the things you might want to be thinking about when it comes to your project specifically. If you have more ideas about working with your students and managing their learning, then by all means you'll want to take them to the discussion forum that's at the end of this section. In that discussion forum, you'll want to talk about, is there something here that you need help solving in either one of these videos? There'll be lots of things going on, I'm sure. See you in the next video.